Edward Phillips, human ambassador to the Tholian Empire, reaches for an ornate crystal goblet at the state dinner, unaware that his action will grant him the right to breed with any willing Tholian female. The moment his fingers touch the ceremonial cup, a hush falls over the grand hall. Tholian eyes, multifaceted and gleaming, focus intently on the oblivious human. The Tholian emperor rises, mandibles clicking in what Edward's translator interprets as a mix of surprise and amusement. "Ambassador Phillips," the emperor's voice resonates through the chamber, "you have activated the right of genetic ascendancy. For the next lunar cycle, you may breed with any consenting Tholian female." Edward's jaw drops, his mind racing to comprehend the implications. He glances at his human aides, who appear equally stunned. The Tholian diplomats around him buzz with a mixture of excitement and alarm. Within minutes, the Tholian High Council convenes an emergency session in an adjoining chamber. Edward overhears heated debates through the translucent crystalline walls. Words like genetic purity and interspecies contamination clash against phrases such as diplomatic opportunity and genetic diversity. As the council argues, Edward's communication device chirps insistently. Earth's government, caught off guard by this development, floods him with urgent messages. They demand explanations, warn of potential diplomatic fallout, and struggle to provide coherent guidance. Amidst the chaos, a tall, elegant Tholian approaches Edward. Her carapace shimmers with iridescent hues, indicating her high social status. "I am Belle," she introduces herself, her translator conveying a tone of scientific curiosity. "I lead the Tholian Genetic Research Institute. Your participation in this ritual could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies genetics." Before Edward can respond, more Tholian females gather around him. Their chittering translates into a cacophony of interested inquiries and subtle propositions. Edward feels overwhelmed, his diplomatic training offering no precedent for this situation. A regal Tholian, adorned with imperial insignia, ushers Edward into a private alcove. "The Emperor wishes to speak with you," she whispers. "He sees potential in incorporating human traits into the royal lineage." Edward's mind reels. He's acutely aware that his actions over the next lunar cycle could reshape Tholian society and alter the course of human-Tholian relations. The weight of this responsibility settles heavily on his shoulders. As if sensing his distress, Belle places a surprisingly gentle appendage on Edward's arm. "Ambassador," she says, her translator conveying reassurance, "this is an unprecedented opportunity for both our species. We can bridge gaps in ways never before imagined." Edward nods, gathering his composure. He realizes he must navigate this complex situation with the utmost care. Every decision, every interaction, could have far-reaching consequences. Just then, Edward's device chirps again. A message from Earth catches his eye, warning of human supremacist groups rallying in support of his new status. They view this as a chance to assert human dominance in the galaxy. Edward takes a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. He stands at a crossroads of history, biology, and diplomacy. The next lunar cycle will test his skills as an ambassador, his ethics as a human, and potentially alter the genetic future of an entire alien race. As the first day of the ritual approaches, Edward feels the eyes of two worlds upon him. He knows that every move he makes will be scrutinized, analyzed, and potentially criticized. Yet beneath the pressure, a part of him recognizes the incredible opportunity this presents for fostering understanding between humans and Tholians. With renewed determination, Edward straightens his posture and prepares to address the gathered Tholians. Whatever happens, he's committed to handling this bizarre turn of events with all the dignity and responsibility his position demands. As Edward prepared to address the gathered Tholians, a sharp chime from his communication device interrupted his thoughts. The Tholian High Council had reached a decision. Their mandate echoed through the crystalline halls. A screening process would be implemented for potential mates, ensuring only the most genetically compatible and socially appropriate Tholian females would be presented to Edward. The announcement sent ripples of discontent through the lower caste Tholians present. Chittering protests erupted from the fringes of the gathered crowd. their multifaceted eyes flashing with indignation. Edward observed the scene with growing unease, acutely aware of the social divisions he had unwittingly exposed. Amidst the commotion, Belle, the tall, elegant Tholian scientist, deftly maneuvered through the throng. She placed a delicate appendage on Edward's shoulder, her iridescent carapace shimmering under the bioluminescent lights. "Ambassador," she said, her translator conveying a tone of urgency, "we must speak privately. There's much to discuss about Tholian physiology and the potential of our genetic mixing." Edward nodded, grateful for a momentary reprieve from the mounting pressure. Belle led him to a secluded alcove, its walls pulsating with a soft blue glow. "Our species are more compatible than you might think," Belle explained, her mandibles clicking rapidly as she spoke. "The genetic possibilities are extraordinary. I propose a controlled experiment with myself as the first willing participant." Edward's mind raced. The scientist in him thrilled at the prospect of groundbreaking research, while the diplomat urged caution. Before he could respond, a regal Tholian adorned with imperial insignia approached. "The Emperor requests your presence, Ambassador," the Tholian announced. "He wishes you to meet Princess Zira in the Imperial Gardens." Edward found himself ushered through winding corridors of living crystal, each turn revealing new wonders of Tholian architecture. The gardens themselves were a breathtaking spectacle of alien flora, bioluminescent plants casting an ethereal glow across the landscape. Princess Zira awaited him by a fountain of liquid crystal. Her carapace, adorned with intricate patterns denoting her royal status, caught the light in mesmerizing ways. "Ambassador Phillips," she greeted him, her translator conveying a tone of quiet authority. "I trust you understand the gravity of your position." Edward nodded, finding himself drawn into a discussion about the political ramifications of their potential union. Zira's quick wit and regal bearing both impressed and intrigued him, adding another layer of complexity to his already difficult decision. As Edward conversed with the princess, his communication device buzzed incessantly. Earth's government, alarmed by the escalating situation, had dispatched a team of advisors led by Dr. Marcus Stein, a renowned xenobiologist. Upon their arrival, Dr. Stein wasted no time in conducting a series of tests on Edward. The results sent shockwaves through both human and Tholian scientific communities. "It's remarkable," Dr. Stein exclaimed, poring over holographic displays of genetic data. "There are unexpected similarities between human and Tholian genetic structures. Successful interbreeding isn't just possible, it could potentially unlock evolutionary pathways we never imagined." The news spread rapidly, intensifying the already charged atmosphere. Human supremacist groups on Earth launched a propaganda campaign, portraying Edward as a conqueror of alien worlds. Their message flooded Edward's communication channels, much to his dismay. As the first day of the rite of genetic ascendancy dawned, the Tholian capital transformed into a hive of activity. Females from across the empire gathered, their chittering filling the air with a cacophony of excitement and anticipation. Security forces patrolled the streets, their crystalline armor glinting in the alien sunlight. Edward retreated to his quarters, seeking a moment of solitude amidst the chaos. He stood by a window, gazing out at the bustling Tholian cityscape. The weight of his impending decision pressed down on him, each potential choice branching out into countless possible futures. A gentle knock at the door broke his reverie. Belle entered, her movements careful and measured. "The ritual will begin soon, Ambassador," she said softly. "Have you made your decision?" Edward turned to face her, his expression a mixture of perseverance and uncertainty. "I'm still weighing my options, Belle. The implications of this ritual extend far beyond just me or even our two species." Belle nodded, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the room's soft light. "Whatever you choose, know that it will shape the future of human-Tholian relations for generations to come." As Belle spoke, Edward's communication device chimed once more. A message from Princess Zira appeared, requesting his presence in the imperial throne room. The rite of genetic ascendancy was about to begin, and all eyes, human and Tholian alike, were fixed on Edward Phillips, the unlikely linchpin in this unprecedented moment of interspecies history. Edward took a deep breath, steeling himself for the momentous event ahead. As he stepped out of his quarters, Belle and Princess Zira flanked him, their presence a reminder of the complex choices he faced. The Great Hall of Ascendancy loomed before them, its crystalline structure catching the light of Tholian Prime's twin suns. As they approached, Edward felt a subtle vibration in the air, a result of the hall's unique design to amplify pheromones and genetic signatures. Upon entering, Edward was immediately struck by the grandeur of the space. Thousands of Tholians filled the tiered seating, their multifaceted eyes fixed upon him. At the center stood a raised dais, surrounded by a shimmering pool of bioluminescent liquid. The Tholian Emperor's voice boomed through the hall, signaling the start of the ceremony. "Let the rite of genetic ascendancy begin." Edward was ushered towards the pool. As he disrobed and entered the glowing liquid, he felt a tingling sensation across his skin. The bioluminescent bath enveloped him, seeping into his pores and seeming to penetrate to his very core. When he emerged, Edward's skin radiated with an ethereal blue glow. A collective chittering arose from the assembled Tholians, a sound his translator interpreted as a mix of awe and anticipation. Princess Zira approached first, her regal bearing unmistakable, even among the sea of Tholians. In her appendages, she held a scepter that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. "Ambassador Phillips," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "I offer you the scepter of our royal lineage. With it, we can forge a union that will reshape the future of our empires." Edward accepted the scepter, feeling its warmth and sensing an inexplicable connection to the Tholian princess. Before he could respond, Belle stepped forward. "Ambassador," she said, her scientific curiosity evident in her tone, "I present to you this data crystal. It contains my research on the unprecedented possibilities of human Tholian genetic compatibility. Our union could unlock scientific advancements beyond our wildest imaginations." As Edward contemplated these options, more Tholian females approached. Each made their case, highlighting unique attributes and potential benefits of selecting them as a genetic partner. The procession continued, a dizzying array of choices and possibilities. Feeling overwhelmed, Edward requested a brief recess. As he stepped away from the dais, Dr. Marcus Stein hurried to his side. "Edward," Stein whispered urgently, "the bioluminescent bath has altered your physiology. You're now hyper-compatible with Tholian biology, but it's temporary. We have a 24-hour window for successful genetic transfer." Before Edward could fully process this information, a commotion erupted at the entrance of the Great Hall. A group of Tholians burst through the security line, led by a small but determined female. "I am Zira," she announced, her voice ringing out across the suddenly silent hall. "I may be of lower caste, but my genetic lineage is strong and diverse. I deserve consideration in this rite." The Emperor, sensing the potential for unrest, made a swift decision. "Let her approach," he commanded, much to the visible dismay of several council members. Zira stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Edward. "Ambassador," she said, her voice softening, "I offer no royal blood, no scientific advancements, but I bring the strength and resilience of my people, the common Tholians who form the backbone of our empire." Edward found himself captivated by Zira's boldness and sincerity. Her inclusion had shifted the atmosphere in the hall, creating a palpable sense of change. As he turned to address the assembled Tholians, Edward caught a glimpse of movement in his peripheral vision. Among the Tholian attendants, a figure seemed out of place, moving with a distinctly non-Tholian gait. The realization struck him. A human had somehow infiltrated the ceremony. Edward's mind raced. He had to make his choice, a decision that would impact two civilizations, all while being acutely aware of the potential threat lurking in the shadows. The weight of the moment pressed down on him as he prepared to speak, the eyes of two worlds watching intently. Edward opened his mouth to address the assembled Tholians, but before he could utter a word, chaos erupted in the Great Hall of Ascendancy. A blinding flash filled the chamber, followed by an eerie silence. The bioluminescent glow that had permeated the hall suddenly vanished, plunging the space into near-total darkness. Confused chittering echoed through the chamber as Tholians stumbled in the unexpected blackout. Edward blinked rapidly, trying to adjust his eyes to the sudden absence of light. In the dim glow cast by his own temporarily altered skin, he caught sight of a figure moving with unnatural speed and purpose through the panicked crowd. "Ambassador Phillips," a human voice called out. "This way! We're here to extract you!" Edward's heart raced as he recognized the voice. It belonged to Marcus Graves, a known human supremacist agent. Graves materialized from the darkness, grabbing Edward's arm with surprising strength. "It's for your own protection," Graves hissed, attempting to pull Edward towards the exit. In that split second, Edward made his choice. He planted his feet firmly and wrenched his arm free from Graves's grasp. "No," Edward said firmly. "I won't abandon my post or this ceremony." Graves' face contorted with anger. "You fool! You don't understand what's at stake here." Before Graves could make another move, Tholian security forces swarmed around them. Their crystalline armor glinted faintly in the low light as they surrounded the human intruder. A brief but intense scuffle ensued, with Graves putting up a fierce resistance before being subdued. As order gradually returned to the hall and emergency lighting systems flickered to life, Edward found himself face to face with the Tholian Emperor. The imposing figure's multifaceted eyes seemed to pierce through Edward, assessing him. "Ambassador Phillips," the Emperor's voice boomed through the hall, "your actions in this moment of crisis have not gone unnoticed. You have demonstrated your commitment to our alliance in the face of adversity." A wave of approving clicks and chirps rippled through the assembled Tholians. The Emperor raised an appendage, silencing the crowd. "In light of these events, we must accelerate the right of genetic ascendancy. Ambassador, you must choose your first genetic partner immediately. This union will serve as a symbol of our newly strengthened alliance." Edward's mind raced. The pressure of the moment greatly troubled upon him as he scanned the expectant faces around him. His gaze settled on Bell, the Tholian scientist who had first approached him with the idea of a controlled experiment. "I choose Bell," Edward announced, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. Bell stepped forward, her iridescent carapace shimmering in the emergency lighting. "I am honored, Ambassador," she said, her mandibles clicking rapidly with excitement. Without further delay, Edward and Bell were escorted to a specially prepared chamber. The room hummed with advanced technology, its walls lined with pulsating biomonitors and environmental control systems. Dr. Marcus Stein hurried in after them, his face a mixture of concern and scientific curiosity. "Edward," Stein said urgently, "we need to move quickly. Your altered physiology is already showing signs of reverting. We have a limited window for successful genetic transfer." As the rite began in earnest, Edward found himself immersed in a surreal experience unlike anything he had ever imagined. Bell's exoskeleton seemed to soften, revealing previously hidden sensory organs. Their genetic material was carefully collected and analyzed in real time by the surrounding equipment. "Incredible," Dr. Stein muttered, his eyes glued to a holographic display of rapidly changing data. "The compatibility markers are off the charts. This could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies genetics." As the rite concluded, a palpable sense of anticipation filled the air. Tholian and human scientists alike pored over the data, their excitement growing with each passing moment. The successful completion of this first coupling marked a historic milestone in interspecies relations. However, the elation was short-lived. Dr. Stein's face fell as he studied a new set of readings. "Edward, we have a problem," he said, his voice tight with concern. "Your physiology is reverting faster than we anticipated. The window for additional genetic transfers is rapidly closing." Before Edward could fully process this information, the chamber door burst open. Princess Zira strode in, her regal bearing unmistakable even in the clinical setting. "Ambassador," she announced, her translator conveying a tone of urgency, "I insist on being your next partner. The introduction of human genetics into the royal bloodline is of paramount importance to our empire." Edward opened his mouth to respond, but was cut off by a commotion outside the chamber. Zira, the lower caste Tholian who had fought for her chance to participate in the rite, pushed her way into the room. "Wait," Zira called out, her voice filled with grit. "I deserve a chance as well. The strength of our alliance should not be built solely on royal blood, but on the diversity of all our people." As tension mounted in the chamber, Dr. Stein's communicator chirped urgently. He listened intently, his expression growing more grave by the second. "Edward," Stein said, turning to face the diplomat, "we've received reports of unrest in the Tholian capital. News of the human supremacist infiltration has spread, leading to clashes between pro-human and isolationist factions. The success or failure of your next coupling could have far-reaching consequences for both our species." Edward's mind reeled as he tried to process the rapidly escalating situation. The weight of his next decision pressed down upon him, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. As he struggled to find the right words, a Tholian attendant entered the chamber. "Ambassador Phillips," the attendant announced, "your presence is required immediately. The Tholian High Council has convened an emergency session to address the current crisis. They request that you address the council and share your intentions regarding the continuation of the rite." Edward took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. As he prepared to follow the attendant, he cast one last glance at Belle, Princess Zira, and Zira. Each of their faces reflected a different aspect of the complex situation he now faced. With a nod of purpose, Edward stepped out of the chamber and into the uncertain future that awaited him. Edward followed the Tholian attendant through the winding corridors of the palace, his mind racing with the implications of the unfolding crisis. The bioluminescent glow of his skin was already beginning to fade, a stark reminder of the limited time he had to navigate this delicate situation. As they approached the High Council chamber, Edward could hear the agitated chittering of Tholian voices through the ornate doors. The attendant ushered him inside, where he was met with a sea of multifaceted eyes, all trained on him. The Emperor raised an appendage, silencing the room. "Ambassador Phillips, we find ourselves at a crossroads. The events of today have sparked unrest throughout our capital. We require your input on how to proceed with the rite of genetic ascendancy." Edward took a deep breath, acutely aware of the weight of his words. "Esteemed council members, I propose a solution that may address the concerns of all parties involved. Let us implement a lottery system for the selection of genetic partners, open to females from all castes. This approach would ensure fairness and representation across your society." A chorus of clicks and chirps filled the chamber as the Tholians discussed the proposal. The Emperor's gaze remained fixed on Edward, assessing the human diplomat's suggestion. "Your proposal has merit, Ambassador," the Emperor finally responded. "It may indeed help quell the growing tensions. We will proceed with this lottery system immediately." Within hours, a sophisticated genetic database was established, and thousands of Tholian females submitted their profiles. Human and Tholian scientists worked side by side, their fingers flying over holographic interfaces as they oversaw the selection process. Edward stood beside Dr. Stein, watching the final results materialize on a large screen. The doctor leaned in close, his voice low and urgent. "Edward, I've been analyzing your latest bioscans. The window for successful genetic transfer is closing faster than we anticipated. You likely have time for only 2 more couplings before your physiology reverts completely." Before Edward could respond, the list of selected females appeared on the screen. 10 names glowed in Tholian script, representing a diverse cross-section of the Empire's genetic lineages. Among them, Edward recognized 2 familiar names, Princess Zira and Zira, the lower caste female who had disrupted the earlier ceremony. The selection sparked immediate reactions throughout the capital. Reports flooded in of celebrations in the lower districts, while pockets of the elite quarters saw protests forming. Edward knew he had to act quickly to maintain the fragile balance. With time running short, Edward made his decision. He turned to the Emperor and announced, "For my second coupling, I choose Princess Zira." The princess stepped forward, her carapace shimmering with an iridescent glow. The coupling took place in a grand ceremonial chamber, with the Emperor and high-ranking officials observing from elevated platforms. As their genetic material merged, monitored by an array of advanced equipment, Edward felt a strange tingling sensation coursing through his body. Dr. Stein's voice cut through the ceremonial chittering. "The coupling is successful, Edward. Preliminary scans show promising genetic combinations." Without pause, Edward announced his final choice. "For my third and final coupling, I select Zira." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled Tholians. Zira stepped forward, her smaller frame vibrating with a mixture of nervousness and willpower. Their coupling took place in a more private setting, but was no less monitored by the ever-present scientists. As the final genetic transfer concluded, Edward felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He watched as his skin's bioluminescence flickered and faded, signaling the end of his Tholian-compatible state. Dr. Stein approached, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. "We've done it, Edward. All 3 genetic transfers were successful. The lab teams are already analyzing the combined DNA patterns. However, your body has undergone significant stress. We need to get you under medical observation immediately." As Edward was led to a medical bay, he caught glimpses of the chaos unfolding in the capital through the palace's crystal windows. Throngs of Tholians filled the streets, some celebrating, others protesting. The division was palpable, even from a distance. In the medical bay, Edward drifted in and out of consciousness, his body working to revert to its natural state. Through the haze, he heard snippets of conversation, reports of human supremacist groups mobilizing, the emperor declaring a state of emergency, plans for a grand ceremony to recognize the potential offspring. When Edward finally regained full awareness, he found Dr. Stein at his bedside, reviewing data on a handheld device. "Welcome back," Stein said, his tone serious. "You've been out for nearly a day. A lot has happened." Edward tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "Fill me in, doctor." Stein nodded, his eyes never leaving the data screen. "The genetic material from your couplings is showing remarkable stability. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. But that's not all. Earth has dispatched a diplomatic team. They'll be here within hours to assess the situation and negotiate terms for this genetic exchange." Before Edward could respond, an alarm blared through the medical bay. A Tholian security officer burst into the room, his crystalline armor glinting under the harsh lights. "Ambassador, Doctor," the officer's translated voice crackled with urgency. "We've intercepted communications indicating a possible coup attempt by an extremist military faction. They're opposed to the genetic mixing and plan to seize control of the research facilities." Edward's mind raced, the implications of this new threat cascading through his thoughts. He knew that the next few hours would be crucial, not just for the success of the right of genetic ascendancy, but for the very future of human-Tholian relations. As he swung his legs off the bed, ignoring the protests of his still-recovering body, Edward steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The fate of 2 species now rested in the balance, and he was determined to see this through, despite the toll. Overwhelming desire to protect the fragile progress they had made. As Edward steeled himself to face the mounting crisis, a deafening explosion rocked the medical bay, sending shockwaves through the building. Alarms blared as acrid smoke filled the air. Edward stumbled to his feet, his body still weak from the genetic procedures. Dr. Stein grabbed his arm, steadying him. "We need to move now," Stein shouted over the chaos. They rushed out of the medical bay, only to be met with a scene of utter pandemonium. Tholian security forces clashed with heavily armed insurgents in the corridors. Crystalline shards from shattered walls littered the floor, crunching under their feet as they ran. Edward's mind raced, trying to process the rapidly unfolding events. "What's happening?" he gasped, struggling to keep up with Stein. The doctor pulled him into an alcove as a group of Tholian extremists stormed past. "It's a coup," Stein whispered urgently. "General Kraz and his faction are making their move." Before Edward could respond, a familiar voice crackled through Stein's communicator. It was Belle, her usually calm tone now imbued with panic. "Dr. Stein, Ambassador Phillips, can you hear me? The hybrid embryos are in danger. We need to move them to safety immediately." Edward grabbed the communicator. "Belle, where are you?" "In the main research lab with Zira. We're preparing to transport the samples to a secure facility, but we need help." A nearby explosion cut the transmission short. Edward turned to Stein, drive etched on his face. "We have to get to them." As they navigated the chaos-filled corridors, the full scale of the coup became apparent. Loyalist Tholians fought against Kraz's forces, their crystalline bodies clashing in a deadly dance of sharp edges and laser fire. Suddenly, a group of human figures emerged from the smoke, their faces obscured by sleek masks. The leader, a woman with ice-blue eyes, stepped forward. Ambassador Phillips, she said, her voice cold and precise. I'm Lydia Frost. We're here to extract you and the genetic samples. Earth has authorized an immediate evacuation. Edward hesitated, sensing something off about the situation. Before he could respond, a barrage of laser fire erupted around them. Lydia and her team returned fire, their advanced weapons cutting through the Tholian attackers with ruthless efficiency. In the confusion, Edward felt a sharp tug on his arm. He turned to see Vex, a Tholian he recognized from earlier briefings on the planet's political landscape. Ambassador, you can't trust them, Vex chittered urgently. They're human supremacists. Come with me if you want to save the embryos and preserve the future of our species. Edward made a split-second decision. He nodded to Vex and shouted to Stein over the din of battle. Doctor, we're going with Vex. They sprinted away, leaving Lydia and her team engaged in a firefight with Kraz's forces. Vex led them through a series of hidden passages, the walls pulsing with an eerie bioluminescence. We're part of the evolutionary vanguard, Vex explained as they ran. We believe the human-Tholian hybrids are the key to our species' future. They emerged into a vast underground cavern where Bell and Zira were frantically working to secure the hybrid embryos. The genetic samples floated in shimmering stasis fields, their potential for a new future almost palpable. Edward, Bell exclaimed, relief evident in her multifaceted eyes. We need to move these embryos immediately. The equipment here is failing due to power disruptions from the fighting above. As they began the delicate process of transferring the embryos, a holographic communication flickered to life. Princess Zira's image appeared, her usual regal bearing marred by visible distress. Ambassador, Dr. Stein, listen carefully, she said, her voice urgent. General Kraz has captured my father. He's declared the right null and void and ordered your capture. I'm using my access codes to guide you through the secret passages. You must get the embryos off-world within the next 48 hours, or all hope is lost. Suddenly, the cavern shook violently. Rocks and crystal shards rained down as the ceiling began to crack. The planet's sun! Vex shouted, checking a nearby sensor array. It's entered an unexpected period of intense solar activity. Our communications and transport systems are being disrupted. Edward looked around at the faces of his companions, human and Tholian alike, each reflecting the gravity of their situation. The embryos, the key to a potential galactic revolution in interspecies relations, hung in the balance. With Kraz's forces closing in, human supremacists on their trail, and a solar storm raging above, their window for escape was rapidly closing. As another tremor shook the cavern, Edward knew they had to act fast. The fate of two species, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on their next move. With dedication, he turned to the group and prepared to outline their desperate plan for survival and escape. Edward turned to the group, his mind racing with the gravity of their situation. We need to move these embryos now, he said, his voice steady despite the tremors shaking the cavern. Vex, lead the way to the underground facility. As they hurried through the winding tunnels, the bioluminescent walls pulsed with an increasingly erratic rhythm, mirroring the chaos above. Belle cradled the stasis container holding the precious embryos, her multifaceted eyes darting nervously between her cargo and the unstable path ahead. They emerged into a vast chamber filled with sleek Tholian technology. Zira rushed to a nearby console, her crystalline fingers flying over the controls. The power systems are failing, she chittered urgently. We're losing stability in the stasis fields. Edward surveyed the room, taking in the array of equipment and the worried faces of his companions. Belle, what do we need to keep those embryos viable? Before Belle could respond, a violent tremor rocked the facility. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling, showering them with crystal shards. It's not just the fighting, Vex said, checking a nearby sensor array. The solar storm is intensifying. It's disrupting our power grid and communications. As if on cue, a distant boom echoed through the complex, followed by the sound of grinding metal and stone. General Kraz's forces had begun their assault on the facility's outer defenses. Edward's mind raced, weighing their options. Belle, Zira, focus on stabilizing the embryos. Vex, I need you to coordinate our defenses. Use whatever internal security systems we have left. As the group sprang into action, Edward noticed a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision. He turned to see a shimmering distortion in the air near one of the maintenance shafts. His eyes narrowed as he realized the implications. "Everyone, be on guard," he warned. "We're not alone in here." No sooner had the words left his mouth than a group of figures materialized, their sleek armor gleaming under the facility's emergency lights. At their head stood Lydia Frost, her ice-blue eyes locked on Edward. "I'll say this once, Ambassador," Lydia said, her voice cold and precise. "Hand over the embryos and the Tholian artifact, and we'll ensure your safe passage off this rock." Edward's mind reeled. Artifact. He glanced at Vex, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. There was more to this facility than he'd been told. Before Edward could respond, the chamber erupted into chaos. Kraz's forces burst through a weakened section of wall, their crystalline forms glinting menacingly in the dim light. Simultaneously, Lydia's team sprang into action, their advanced weapons cutting through the air with deadly precision. In the midst of the firefight, Belle's voice cut through the din. "Edward, the embryos are destabilizing. We need more power." Edward ducked behind a console, his mind racing. They needed a solution, and fast. As he scanned the room, his eyes fell on a heavily secured door at the far end of the chamber. The experimental energy core Vex had mentioned earlier. It had to be behind that door. "Belle!" Edward shouted over the chaos. "There's an experimental Tholian energy core in this facility. If we can activate it, we might be able to save the embryos." Belle's eyes widened in understanding. "But the security systems—" "I'll handle it," Edward said, already moving towards the secured area. "My altered physiology might just get me through." As Edward made his way across the chamber, weaving through the crossfire, he felt a strange tingling sensation coursing through his body. The last vestiges of his Tholian alterations were reacting to the facility's defenses. He reached the security door, placing his hand on the crystalline surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the door began to slide open. Edward stepped into a room humming with almost unchecked energy. At its center stood a pulsating crystal structure, its facets reflecting a kaleidoscope of colors. As he approached the core, Edward's skin began to glow faintly, resonating with the energy field. He placed his hands on the control interface, feeling the power surge through him. Suddenly, the core flared to life, sending a wave of energy coursing through the facility. The lights stabilized, and Belle's triumphant cry echoed from the main chamber. "It's working! The embryos are stabilizing!" But as the power surged, something unexpected happened. A section of wall near the core shimmered and disappeared, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, bathed in an otherworldly glow, stood an ancient Tholian artifact. The artifact pulsed with energy, seeming to react to the presence of the hybrid embryos. As Edward watched in awe, he realized that this discovery could change everything. The balance of power, the future of human-Tholian relations, perhaps even the course of galactic history. But there was no time to contemplate the implications. The sounds of battle grew closer, and Edward knew he had to act fast. The fate of 2 species now rested in his hands, and the decisions he made in the next few moments would shape the future of the galaxy. Galaxy for generations to come. With a deep breath, Edward turned back to the chaotic scene unfolding in the main chamber. The hybrid embryos, once safely contained in their stasis fields, were now pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Belle's eyes widened as she monitored their rapid development on a nearby console. "Edward," she called out, her voice tinged with urgency. "The embryos, they're growing at an exponential rate. We need to move them to a more secure containment unit immediately." Without hesitation, Edward rushed to Belle's side, his mind racing to formulate a plan. "The artifact," he said, glancing back at the glowing relic. "It must be triggering their accelerated growth. We need to find a way to shield them from its energy." As they worked to transfer the rapidly developing embryos, Zira and Vex took up defensive positions near the chamber's entrance. Vex's crystalline form shimmered as he manipulated the facility's remaining security systems, creating a maze of energy barriers to slow Kraz's advancing forces. Zira, her multifaceted eyes scanning for threats, improvised weapons from the scattered debris. "We'll hold them off as long as we can," she chittered, her voice steely with commitment. The sound of heavy artillery fire echoed through the complex, causing the walls to shudder ominously. Edward knew they were running out of time. Suddenly, a familiar figure materialized near the artifact chamber. Lydia Frost, her ice-blue eyes now gleaming with an unnatural light. Her team followed close behind, their bodies twisted and warped by the artifact's influence. "Phillips!" Lydia called out, her voice distorted. "The artifact belongs to us. Step aside or we'll take it by force." Edward's mind raced, searching for a solution. In a split-second decision, he turned to Bell. "Initiate a facility-wide lockdown. Seal off the artifact chamber." Bell's fingers flew over the controls, and massive bulkheads began to descend, cutting off Lydia and her team from the rest of the complex. The human supremacists found themselves trapped with the increasingly unstable relic, their agonized cries muffled by the thick barriers. As Edward returned his attention to the hybrid embryos, he noticed something extraordinary. The containment units now held not embryos, but rapidly maturing children. Their features were a mesmerizing blend of human and Tholian characteristics, their eyes filled with an intelligence beyond their apparent years. Belle gasped, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "Edward, look at their neural activity. It's off the charts." Before Edward could respond, a holographic message flickered to life. Princess Zira's image appeared, her expression grave. "Ambassador Phillips, I've uncovered critical information about the artifact," she said hurriedly. "It's part of an ancient Tholian terraforming system. If fully activated, it could reshape our entire world." The implications of this revelation sent Edward's heart pounding. He turned to the hybrid children, now resembling young adolescents, and made a bold decision. "Can you understand me?" he asked, approaching their containment units. To his amazement, the hybrids nodded in unison. One of them, a girl with iridescent skin and multifaceted eyes, placed her hand against the transparent barrier. "We can help," she said, her voice a harmonious blend of human speech and Tholian frequencies. "We understand the technology. We can control it." Edward quickly explained the dire situation to the hybrid children. As he spoke, he could see their extraordinary minds processing the information, formulating strategies faster than he could articulate them. Suddenly, the facility rocked with a massive explosion. General Kraz's forces had breached the outer defenses and were now pouring into the complex. "We're out of time," Vex called out, his crystalline form cracking under the strain of maintaining the energy barriers. Edward turned back to the hybrid children. "We need to create a disturbance, something to disrupt Kraz's forces and clear a path for our escape. Can you use the artifact's terraforming capabilities to do that?" The hybrids exchanged glances, then nodded in unison. "We'll need direct access to the facility's main systems," the girl said. As Edward and Belle worked to interface the hybrids with the complex's technology, a chilling laugh echoed through the chamber. Lydia Frost emerged from a maintenance shaft, her body now a grotesque fusion of human and crystalline forms. "Did you really think you could keep me from the artifact's power?" she snarled, her eyes fixed on Edward. "I've evolved beyond your comprehension, Phillips, and now you'll help me unlock the relic's full potential." Edward positioned himself between Lydia and the hybrid children, his altered physiology humming with tension. As Kraz's forces pressed closer and Lydia advanced, the fate of two species hung in the balance. The hybrid children worked feverishly to initiate their plan, the artifact's energy building to a crescendo around them. In that moment, Edward knew that his next actions would determine not just their survival, but the future of human-Tholian relations, and perhaps the entire galaxy. With the complex shuddering under the assault and time running out, he prepared to make his stand. Final decision. With a nod to the hybrid children, Edward activated the facility's emergency protocols. The complex shuddered as massive energy waves pulsed from the ancient Tholian artifact. The hybrid children, their bodies now resembling young adults, channeled the artifact's power through their unique physiology. Their skin shimmered with an otherworldly glow as they interfaced directly with the facility's systems. "Containment field stabilized," announced one of the hybrids, her voice a harmonic blend of human and Tholian tones. "Initiating protective barrier." A shimmering dome of energy enveloped the core chamber, encasing Edward, Belle, Zira, and Vex. Outside, the sounds of battle grew chaotic as Kraz's forces encountered the artifact's terraforming effects. Edward watched in awe as the hybrid children worked in perfect synchronization, their movements fluid and precise. Atmospheric disruption at 60% and rising, reported another hybrid, his multifaceted eyes scanning holographic readouts. General Kraz's offensive capabilities are diminishing rapidly. Suddenly, a portion of the energy barrier flickered and distorted. Lydia Frost, her body now a grotesque fusion of human and crystalline forms, stepped through the weakened section, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light fixed on Edward. "Phillips," she snarled, her voice distorted and inhuman. "You can't stop what's coming. The power of this artifact will be mine." Edward positioned himself between Lydia and the hybrid children. "Lydia, listen to me. The artifact's energy is unstable. We need to work together to contain it before—" His words were cut short as Lydia lunged forward, her crystalline arm morphing into a deadly blade. Edward barely managed to dodge, feeling the rush of air as the blade passed inches from his face. "Belle! Zira!" Edward called out as he ducked behind a console. "Get the hybrid children to safety. They're our only hope of stabilizing the artifact network." Belle nodded, her face set with willpower. She quickly ushered the hybrid children towards a side exit, Zira covering their retreat with makeshift weapons. Vex stepped forward, his crystalline form cracking under the strain of maintaining the energy barriers. "I'll guide them to the other artifacts. My knowledge of Tholian geography will be crucial." As the group prepared to leave, one of the hybrid children turned back to Edward. Her iridescent skin pulsed with energy as she raised her hand, sending a wave of power towards Lydia. The mutated woman staggered, her enhanced abilities temporarily neutralized. "This will give you time," the hybrid explained, her voice tinged with urgency. "But we must go now to activate the network and end this conflict." Edward nodded, accepting a small communication device from another hybrid. "Go. I'll keep Lydia occupied and prevent her from interfering." As Belle, Zira, Vex, and the hybrid children disappeared through the exit, Edward turned to face Lydia. She was already recovering, her crystalline form pulsing with renewed energy. "You're making a mistake, Phillips," Lydia growled, circling him like a predator. "With the artifact's power, we could reshape not just this world, but the entire galaxy." Edward stood his ground, acutely aware of the artifact's growing energy behind him. "And at what cost, Lydia? Look at what it's done to you already." Outside the facility, General Kraz rallied his remaining loyal forces. Their communications crackled with static as the artifact's terraforming effects spread across the planet's surface. "Push forward," Kraz's voice boomed over the comlinks. "We must secure the facility and stop the activation of the artifact network at all costs." As Kraz's forces mounted their final assault, a sleek Earth vessel broke through the turbulent atmosphere. Dr. Marcus Stein, leading the extraction team, gripped the controls tightly as they navigated through the chaos. "Ambassador Phillips, do you copy?" Stein's voice crackled through the communication device. "We're approaching your position, but the window for extraction is closing fast." Edward, locked in a deadly dance with Lydia, knew he couldn't respond. He had to keep her focused on him, away from the escaping hybrid children and the artifact's controls. Lydia lunged again, her crystalline blade slicing through a nearby console. Sparks flew as Edward rolled away, using the facility's terrain to his advantage. The artifact pulsed with increasing intensity, its energy waves rippling through the complex. As the battle raged within the heart of the facility, Belle led the hybrid children through twisting corridors. Zira and Vex flanked the group, alert for any signs of Kraz's forces. "The first artifact location is 3 clicks north of here," Vex informed them, his crystalline body reflecting the emergency lights. "We'll need to move quickly and avoid detection." One of the hybrid children, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar Tholian landscape visible through a cracked window, spoke up. "We can sense the artifact network. It's calling to us, guiding us." Belle nodded, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "Your connection to the artifacts could be the key to ending this conflict, but we need to hurry." As they made their way out of the facility, the sounds of battle grew louder. General Kraz's forces clashed with the loyalists rallied by Princess Zira, the skies above filled with the chaos of ship-to-ship combat. Back in the heart of the facility, Edward felt the full weight of his decision. He was cut off from escape, facing a mutated and power-hungry Lydia Frost, with the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance. The artifact's energy continued to build, its terraforming effects spreading further across the Tholian homeworld with each passing moment. Edward knew that everything now depended on the hybrid children's mission to activate the artifact network. As he dodged another of Lydia's attacks, he silently urged them onward, hoping against hope that they would succeed in time to save not just him, but the future of human-Tholian relations, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Edward's muscles tensed as he prepared for Lydia's next assault. The artifact's energy pulsed behind him, its power growing with each passing second. Suddenly, the facility shuddered violently, throwing both combatants off balance. "What have you done, Phillips?" Lydia snarled, her crystalline form gleaming in the flickering emergency lights. Before Edward could respond, the walls around them began to shift and morph. Corridors sealed themselves off, while new passages opened, transforming the familiar layout into an ever-changing maze. Edward seized the opportunity, darting through a newly formed doorway. "You can't run forever," Lydia's distorted voice echoed through the transforming facility. Edward's mind raced as he navigated the evolving labyrinth. He needed to buy time for the hybrid children to complete their mission. Spotting an environmental control panel, an idea formed in his mind. With practiced precision, Edward manipulated the controls. The temperature in the adjacent corridor plummeted, causing frost to form on the metallic surfaces. As Lydia rounded the corner, her feet slipped on the icy floor, sending her crashing into a wall. "Clever," she hissed, her crystalline body cracking slightly from the impact. "But not clever enough." Edward didn't wait for her to recover. He sprinted down another corridor, this time adjusting the gravity controls. As Lydia pursued, she found herself suddenly weightless, flailing in the air. "You're only delaying the inevitable," Lydia called out, her voice filled with rage and frustration. The constant reconfiguration of the facility forced Edward to adapt his strategy continuously. He used his knowledge of the complex to his advantage, leading Lydia through a series of traps and obstacles. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. General Kraz's forces, equipped with experimental Tholian battlesuits, breached the outer defenses. Their heavy footsteps echoed through the facility, adding to the chaos. Edward's communication device crackled to life. "Edward, do you copy?" It was Belle's voice, tinged with excitement and urgency. "The hybrid children have activated 3 of the 5 remaining artifacts. The terraforming effect is spreading rapidly across the planet." "Good work," Edward replied, ducking behind a console as Lydia's crystalline blades sliced through the air where his head had been moments before. "What about the last 2? "Heavily guarded by Kraz's loyalists," Belle responded. "We're working on a plan to—" The transmission cut off abruptly as another tremor shook the facility. Edward found himself cornered in a large chamber, the artifact's pulsing core visible through a transparent barrier. Lydia advanced, her mutated form casting grotesque shadows on the walls. "Nowhere left to run, Phillips," she sneered, raising her blade-like arm. Suddenly, a new voice crackled through Edward's communication device. "Ambassador Phillips, this is Dr. Marcus Stein. We've breached the atmosphere and are approaching your position. Extraction window is closing fast. You need to get to the rendezvous point now." Edward's mind raced, weighing his options. He couldn't leave now, not with the mission incomplete and Lydia still a threat. In a split-second decision, he made a choice that would alter the course of events. "Dr. Stein, change of plans," Edward said, his voice steady despite the dire situation. "I need you to extract Lydia Frost instead." "What?" Lydia's eyes widened in surprise, her blade arm lowering slightly. "Ambassador, are you sure?" Stein's voice was filled with concern. "Absolutely," Edward replied, never taking his eyes off Lydia. "She's been affected by the artifact. Earth needs to study its effects, and removing her from the equation will help the hybrid children complete their mission." Before Lydia could react, Edward lunged forward, activating a hidden panel on the wall. A shimmering stasis field enveloped Lydia, freezing her in place. You fool! Lydia raged, her voice distorted by the field. You're throwing away our chance to reshape the galaxy. Edward ignored her protests, relaying Lydia's position to Dr. Stein's team. As the extraction team moved to secure her, a massive explosion rocked the facility. General Kraz's forces had breached the main entrance. The experimental Tholian battlesuits allowed Kraz's soldiers to push through the terraforming disturbances with alarming speed. Edward knew he had only moments before they reached his position. With options dwindling and time running out, Edward made a daring decision. He approached the pulsing core of the artifact, feeling its energy begin to affect his body. The last traces of his Tholian-compatible physiology reacted to the ancient technology, sending waves of sensation through his nervous system. As Edward reached out to interface directly with the artifact, the very fabric of reality seemed to bend around him. The facility continued to warp and change, walls melting and reforming in impossible configurations. I hope this works, Edward muttered, pressing his hand against the artifact's core. A surge of energy coursed through Edward's body, his mind suddenly flooded with alien knowledge and sensations. He saw glimpses of the Tholian homeworld as it once was, and as it could be. With tremendous effort, Edward focused his will, attempting to direct the artifact's power. The terraforming effect intensified, spreading outward from the facility in concentric waves. The approaching Tholian forces stumbled as the ground beneath their feet shifted and transformed. Even their advanced battlesuits struggled to compensate for the rapidly changing environment. Edward gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain control over the artifact's overwhelming power. He knew he was buying time, but at what cost to himself? As the facility continued to warp and change around him, Edward clung to his purpose. The hybrid children needed more time to complete their mission, and he was determined to give it to them, no matter the personal risk. The artifact's energy pulsed through Edward's body, reshaping him on a cellular level. He could feel his consciousness expanding, tapping into the vast network of Tholian technology spread across the planet. In that moment, suspended between human and something far beyond, Edward Phillips faced the greatest challenge of his diplomatic career. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and every second he maintained his connection to the artifact was another chance for peace. The hybrid children to complete their vital mission. As his consciousness expanded, tapping into the vast network of Tholian technology, Edward felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. The last traces of his Tholian-compatible physiology reacted intensely to the ancient artifact, triggering a dramatic transformation. Bioluminescent patterns, reminiscent of Tholian markings, began to glow beneath Edward's skin. The pulsing light spread across his body in intricate, swirling designs. As the transformation progressed, Edward's mind filled with an intuitive understanding of the artifact's terraforming capabilities. With newfound clarity, Edward focused his will on the artifact's core. He channeled its energy, amplifying the terraforming effect in a controlled manner. Shimmering walls of energy materialized throughout the facility, distorting gravity in atmospheric conditions. These barriers effectively slowed General Kraz's advancing forces, forcing them to recalibrate their battlesuits with each encounter. Outside the facility, the hybrid children continued their mission across the planet's surface. They successfully activated the fourth artifact in the network, leaving only one remaining. As each artifact came online, widespread changes swept across the Tholian homeworld. Barren deserts transformed into lush landscapes, while pockets of toxic atmosphere dissipated, replaced by breathable air. Edward observed these changes through his connection to the artifact network. He watched as crystalline forests sprouted from once lifeless plains and clear streams cut through newly formed valleys. The rapid transformation of their world began to sway public opinion among the Tholian population. Many now viewed the terraforming as a positive evolution for their species, a chance for growth and adaptation. Princess Zira, coordinating with her loyalist forces, seized the opportunity presented by the changing landscape. She directed her teams to secure strategic locations where the environment had shifted most dramatically. Her forces established control over newly formed water sources and habitable zones, further weakening General Kraz's position in the ongoing civil conflict. As Edward's mastery over the artifact grew, He discovered he could use its energy to heal his own injuries. The wounds sustained during his battle with Lydia Frost knitted themselves closed, leaving no trace. This revelation sparked a greater understanding of the artifact network's potential. Edward realized it could be used to enhance the entire Tholian species, making them more adaptable to various environments and potentially fostering peaceful expansion rather than conflict. Lost in concentration, Edward inadvertently triggered a reaction that began to merge the facility's structure with the surrounding landscape. Walls transformed into living, crystalline formations, pulsing with the same bioluminescent patterns that now covered Edward's skin. Corridors twisted and reformed into organic-looking tunnels, creating an ever-changing maze that further hindered Kraz's advancing forces. Dr. Marcus Stein, having made the last-minute decision to stay behind and document these historic events, found himself navigating through this transformed facility. He marveled at the merging of technology and nature as he carefully made his way towards Edward's position, his scientific curiosity overriding his sense of self-preservation. General Kraz, growing increasingly frustrated by the continuous setbacks, decided to take matters into his own hands. He donned an advanced prototype of the Tholian battlesuit, its capabilities far surpassing those of his troops. The suit's adaptive systems allowed Kraz to push through the energy barriers created by Edward, though not without considerable effort. As Kraz fought his way through the shifting corridors, Edward received an urgent communication from the hybrid children. Their voices, a mix of excitement and concern, filled his mind through the artifact's network. "Ambassador Phillips, we've reached the final artifact," one of the children reported, "but we can't activate it. There's some kind of genetic lock." Edward probed deeper into the artifact's systems, quickly understanding the problem. "It requires a pure Tholian bloodline," he realized aloud. "Only a member of the royal family can complete the network activation," another child added, their voice tinged with worry. Without hesitation, Edward relayed this critical information to Princess Zira. The princess immediately grasped the gravity of the situation. She knew that her actions in the next few moments would determine the future of her species and the success of the human Tholian hybridization project. Zira's voice crackled through the communication network, resolute and clear. "I understand, Ambassador. I'm on my way to the final artifact's location now." As Zira began her journey, Edward sensed General Kraz's approach through the facility's transformed structure. He knew time was running out. Focusing his newfound abilities, Edward reshaped the central chamber into a defensive position. Crystalline barricades rose from the floor, and gravity wells formed in strategic locations, creating a labyrinth of obstacles to slow Kraz's advance. The chamber became a microcosm of the ongoing transformation of the Tholian world, a perfect blend of ancient technology and evolving biology. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed across the walls, in sync with Edward's own glowing skin, responding to his will and the artifact's power. As Edward stood ready to face General Kraz, he felt a strange sensation ripple through his body. The artifact's energy began to resonate with the hybrid DNA now present in his system, hinting at further changes to come. He realized that the outcome of this confrontation would not only decide the fate of the Tholian world, but also his own destiny and the future of human-alien relations throughout the galaxy. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the transformed corridors, growing louder with each passing second. Edward took a deep breath, his altered physiology allowing him to sense the approach of General Kraz's advanced battlesuit. He positioned himself at the heart of the chamber, surrounded by the pulsing energy of the artifact, ready to face whatever came through the crystalline archway. Doorway. The crystalline walls pulsed with an otherworldly glow as General Kraz burst into the chamber, his advanced battlesuit gleaming under the bioluminescent light. Edward stood his ground, feeling the artifact's energy coursing through his veins, his skin shimmering with intricate patterns. "Phillips!" Kraz's voice boomed through his suit's speakers. "Your interference ends now!" Without hesitation, Kraz charged forward, the suit's servos whining as he closed the distance. Edward, drawing on his newfound connection to the artifact, raised his hand. The floor beneath Kraz's feet suddenly liquefied, crystalline structures rising to ensnare the general's legs. Kraz growled in frustration, the battlesuit's arms transforming into plasma cutters that slice through the crystal growths. "Your parlor tricks won't save you, human." Edward dodged a swipe from Kraz's arm, feeling the heat of the plasma cutter as it passed inches from his face. He retaliated by willing the chamber's gravity to shift, sending Kraz stumbling sideways into a wall that instantly molded around him like quicksand. "This isn't a trick, General," Edward said, his voice resonating with an alien timbre. "This is the future of our worlds." Kraz roared, his suit's thrusters igniting to tear him free from the wall's grasp. He launched himself at Edward, tackling him to the ground. The two grappled, Kraz's augmented strength nearly overwhelming Edward's transformed physiology. As they fought, Edward's mind reached out through the artifact network, sensing the progress of the other hybrid children and Princess Zira. He could feel them approaching the final artifact, their mission nearing its crucial moment. Across the planet, Princess Zira stood before the last artifact, its surface glowing with anticipation. The hybrid children gathered around her, their eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Your Highness," one of the children said, "the artifact requires your royal DNA to activate." Zira nodded, her crystalline form shimmering as she stepped forward. "For the future of our people," she whispered, placing her hand on the artifact's core. The moment Zira's royal DNA made contact, a surge of energy erupted from the artifact. It connected with the other 5 points across the planet, forming a network of pulsing power that began to reshape the Tholian world on a massive scale. Back in the central chamber, Edward felt the pulse of energy from the final artifact's activation. It hit him like a tidal wave, momentarily stunning both him and Kraz. In that instant, Edward's body underwent its final transformation. His skin crystallized, taking on a translucent quality that shimmered with internal light. His eyes became multifaceted, granting him enhanced perception of his surroundings. Edward could feel every atom of his being aligning with the artifact's energy, granting him unparalleled control over the terraforming technology. Kraz, sensing the shift in power, redoubled his efforts. His battlesuit's arms morphed into massive hammers, slamming down towards Edward's head. With his newly enhanced reflexes, Edward caught the hammers mid-swing, the impact sending shockwaves through the chamber. "It's over, Kraz," Edward said, his voice carrying the weight of 2 worlds. "The transformation has begun. There's no stopping it now." With a thought, Edward sent a pulse of energy through Kraz's suit. The advanced technology sputtered and died, leaving the general trapped within the now inert exoskeleton. Kraz struggled futilely, his movements growing weaker as the suit's power drained away. Edward stood, his transformed body pulsing with the combined energy of the artifact network. He reached out with his mind, connecting to every point across the Tholian world. Through this link, he witnessed the planet's rapid transformation. Vast deserts bloomed into lush crystalline forests. Toxic atmospheres dissipated, replaced by breathable air that shimmered with bioluminescent particles. Oceans formed where there had once been only barren rock, their waters a swirling mix of blues and purples. The hybrid children, their mission complete, made their way back to the facility. They found Edward standing over the defeated Kraz, marveling at his new form that perfectly blended human and Tholian physiology. "Ambassador," one of the children said, approaching cautiously. "What happens now?" Edward turned to them, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the pulsing energies of the chamber. "Now, we stabilize the transformation and end this conflict once and for all." Together, Edward and the hybrid children focused their combined abilities on the artifact network. They fine-tuned the terraforming process, ensuring a harmonious balance between the planet's original state and its new, more habitable form. As they worked, reports flooded in from across the planet. Princess Zira's loyalists had seized control of key locations, using the transformed landscape to their advantage. The general population, witnessing the miraculous changes to their world, began to turn against Kraz's forces en masse. Edward received a transmission from Princess Zira herself. Her voice, filled with awe and perseverance, echoed through the chamber. "Ambassador Phillips, the people are calling for an end to the fighting. They want to embrace this new future. Will you help us negotiate peace?" "Of course, Your Highness," Edward replied. "But first, we need to secure General Kraz and his remaining forces." As if on cue, Dr. Marcus Stein entered the chamber, his eyes wide as he took in the transformed Edward and the defeated Kraz. "Ambassador," he said, breathless with excitement, "I've been in contact with Earth. They're sending a diplomatic envoy to assist with the transition." Edward nodded, feeling the weight of his new role settling upon him. He was no longer just a diplomat, or even just a hybrid. He had become a bridge between two species, a living symbol of the potential for cooperation and understanding. As Edward prepared to address the Tholian people and begin the process of negotiating peace, he couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought him to this point. What had begun as a bizarre alien custom had evolved into something far greater, a transformation that would reshape not just the Tholian world, but the entire galaxy. The chamber hummed with energy, a testament to the changes that had occurred and those yet to come. Edward stood at the center of it all, ready to guide both humans and Tholians into a new era of interstellar cooperation.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.